And so we now await what the judge has to say on that after the lunch adjournment. With me, my colleague Andrew Harding, who has been in court throughout this trial, throughout today. Andrew, it all moved very fast.
It did, didn't it? It was extraordinary. The judge taking a scalpel, more like a sledgehammer, to much of the prosecution's case. She dismissed ultimately the evidence of all those neighbours who insisted they heard a woman screaming. She dismissed the evidence, speculation that the couple had been rowing, that all those text messages that the prosecution tried to show meant that surely Oscar and Reeva were having some terrible relationship and that he must have deliberately gone into that toilet to kill her. And we're left with the defence's case. And what was interesting was that initially Judge Masipa made a great deal about the discrepancies between Oscar Pistorius' various versions of what happened in those critical few seconds in that toilet when he was standing, pointing his gun at the bathroom door. And she went through all these different versions, that it was an accident, that he knew someone was coming out and that he fired either intentionally or involuntarily. And I think a lot of people in court thought we're heading towards some sort of murder charge here. And then just in the last few minutes, she concluded that no, the prosecution had not proved any form of murder, and we're left now with culpable homicide, which could still get him, remember, 10 years in prison, or a fine, or a suspended sentence. The judge has massive discretion when it comes to sentencing in the weeks ahead, or, and I think this would be the huge shock, an acquittal. But to me, what's been extraordinary today is that essentially the entire prosecution case could have been forgotten about. They hardly needed to turn up in court. This was all about Oscar Pistorius' performance on the stand, and of course the crucial cross-examination by Karin, the prosecutor, who did rattle Pistorius very, very badly. But it was really about Pistorius' own version and the confusion that he showed, and we're left with essentially Pistorius' own version of events and the possibility that he may still go to prison, not on what the prosecution have accused him of, but on his own muddled version of what he says happened.
What is Oscar Pistorius' demeanour like in court today?
Well, I was sitting right behind him and his father and family, and I actually couldn't see his face. But you could see, particularly towards the end, that his head slumped, his neck muscles were twitching frantically, and it was clear that he was starting to sob, especially when Judge Masipa, who'd, as judges often do, not made it entirely clear what she was really saying. She was quoting a lot of legal cases, and then suddenly she got to the lowest murder conviction, which would be dolus eventualis, and she said they haven't proved that, and she said that very clearly, and everyone really gasped, and Pistorius realized that he would not be found guilty of murder. He is not a murderer. And clearly, with some sort of relief, he started sobbing. His family, though, and I was trying to talk a little bit to some of them afterwards, although they're very guarded now because, of course, there's still a lot to play for. They don't know if it's going to be acquittal or it's going to be culpable homicide, in which case sentencing is a huge issue. They are sort of mixed emotions playing over their faces, hints of relief, but also they know that Pistorius could still spend years in jail. I spoke very briefly to some of his lawyers, and it's still clearly very, very unclear, but I think they're looking, as we suggested for quite some weeks actually, at culpable homicide as the most likely verdict.
Reeva Steenkamp's family is in there as well. Any sense of their emotions?
No. To be fair, they're sitting a little bit further down the line from me, so I've not been able to see them close up, but right throughout, Reeva's mother, June, has been an extraordinary example of controlled emotions. I even remember when her daughter's photo of her head wounds flashed up on screen early in this trial, and she showed nothing. She just put her head down gently, and so it seems like she's been determined to maintain an extraordinary degree of composure.
Andrew, thank you very much. I know you'll be going back into court very shortly, and proceedings will resume after the lunch break in possibly the next half hour. We will be bringing you all the very latest developments, but the dramatic fact emerging from the last half hour is that Oscar Pistorius will not be found guilty of the charge of murder. We'll wait to see what happens next. I'm Karin Giannone here in Pretoria, handing you back to London.